By the late 1990s, Sting had truly turned himself into an icon of the wrestling industry. He played two widely different characters and was so successful at both. And as we know, it's hard finding one great character, let alone two. His contributions to WCW were invaluable, and other than Bill Goldberg, he was their franchise player. The guy that would always be around no matter what. Sting's time in WCW resulted in multiple world championships, the biggest storyline in WCW history with the Icons standing up against the New World Order, but it was all coming to an end, and it wasn't because Sting was leaving, it was because WWF purchased WCW. The purchase of WCW brought a ripple effect to the industry and changed everything. For the wrestlers that were signed, it was an opportunity for a new start, and some of them were very optimistic about the chance to wrestle in the WWF. But these guys were in for a reality check. The WWF guys were very hostile towards WCW wrestlers because them coming in and taking a spot isn't going to make their job any easier. There was a little tension early on, and on TV, DDP, who had a sublime debut and reveal, was turned into the Undertaker's punching bag. Why? I mean, you guys see this picture in the channel very often. You guys know why. And it wasn't stopping anytime soon. Booker T has a big debut and after a couple of weeks gets confronted by The Rock, who says, "Who in the blue hell are you?" He made a joke out of one of WCW's best and beat him multiple times. So the other guys who didn't want to leave hundreds of thousands or even millions on the table for a WWF run were feeling good about themselves. Because why would they end a guaranteed contract from AOL to go and take more L's than Barcelona or the Detroit Pistons? It's a lose-lose situation and decreases your stock if it ends badly. Sting had never been shy about his intentions at this point. He didn't want to sign with the WWF. There's a couple of reports from April of 2001 about potential negotiations between both parties just to get a feel of things, but they didn't materialize to something of true substance. The Icons contract with AOL was set to expire on December 31st, just in time for a potential WrestleMania 18 debut. There wasn't much discussion about this until 2011, where Dave Lagana, a former WWE writer, elaborated further on Sting almost signing with the WWE, and I quote, "Sting at WrestleMania almost happened 9 years ago. Sting was approached that year to make his WWE debut and wrestle on the big event. Once he was introduced to the brand, it was pitched that at WrestleMania 18, Sting would face Kurt Angle. If you remember, Kurt was eventually thrown into a match with Kane with little setup. The deal apparently fell apart as Sting wasn't willing to work the full WWE schedule." Kurt Angle also confirmed this on his podcast. It's a very true story. And a while later, in an interview with The Sun in December 2002, Sting told them, "I honestly don't know. I have no plans, but I'm not going to close the door on coming back. So far, my tour of Europe has been pretty good, and I would go to Japan. I would say my chances of going to Japan or back to Europe are better than me going to the WWE." Damn. Sting also confirmed the WrestleMania 18 rumor and said that all was good between him and Vince, but it all came down to commitment. The former champion wanted to work TV and a pay-per-view, but of course WWE wasn't going to allow that, especially at a time where live events were down. Sting and Goldberg at the time would have been a great addition and probably drove more tickets, but it just wasn't to be because, as he said, he didn't want to commit and go on those grueling tours week after week, day after day, and exhaust himself. He was already miserable in WCW, and doing this here would have only been worse. Now, Sting's stance on why he didn't join WWE was the exact same thing he said in his TNA DVD, his WWE DVD, same exact thing. This is exactly what he said. They come back to back, and they turn around, and they look at each other, and The Rock looks at Booker T, and he said, "Who are you?" That one little comment was all it took to just bury somebody. Let's let the world know that you're a WCW guy, and you're a peon here. It was going to require lots of work for Booker T to try and come back. After all the years I'd put into wrestling at that point, it just seemed like a gamble to me. I understand where he's coming from, because at the end of the day, once people look at you like that, it's hard to change the perception of you being this WCW star, this big guy. And it also didn't help that Booker T had become champion near the very end of WCW, so it was working against him. Do I think Sting would have suffered the same way? I don't personally think he would have suffered the same exact fate that Booker T did. I think it would have been a bit better, but it's hard to say. Following WrestleMania 19 and the debut returns of Goldberg and Kevin Nash, rumors heated of Sting possibly joining, but these rumors were quickly put to rest after Sting committed to NWA TNA. Pro Wrestling Torch reported, as for the possibility of Sting heading to the WWE, officials there are saying that Sting turned down their contract offer because he didn't want to be away from his family by being on the road all the time. Simple as that. And similar to 2002, they were very, very, very close because Sting was pitched to confront Stone Cold Steve Austin after WrestleMania 19. That would have been incredible on paper, you know, like seeing these two icons of the same generation from the different promotions facing off. Once again, stunning Steve Austin is now Stone Cold. Surfer Sting has all changed. They've all evolved. It would have been a great match. It would have been incredible on paper because, well, Austin was hurt. But for sure, it would have been one of the best debuts of that era. The Stinger goes to TNA, has a couple of appearances, but once again feels interested in a WWE return. This time, the optimism was shining off of him. And WWE even asked the question on their website, will Sting join WWE? Fast forward to early 2005, Sting's making the headlines not because of negotiations, but because The Rock wanted him to be his opponent for WrestleMania 21. This was around the time where Rock had some issues with WWE, so the idea never materialized. Instead, Sting signed with TNA, and this was a long-term contract as the company was trying to expand and compete with WWE. So it meant the rumors of Sting signing with WWE were put to rest for the time being. It really looked like it was close. You know, these guys were talking good about each other from both parties, especially after WrestleMania 20. Sting was talking very good about them. He's like, oh, it'd be good to face these guys, Undertaker, Stone Cold, whatever. He praised Shelton Benjamin, but it just wasn't to be. And the phone call with Vince about TNA was certainly something. Here's what Sting had to say in an interview, and I quote, and I did talk to him, Vince McMahon, after that too, and that's when the attorneys got involved. You know, I had a great conversation with Vince, and the attorneys got involved, and things kind of changed. And so I held off my end of going to TNA, and I'll never forget that conversation with Vince. He's on the phone with me, and he says, you know, Sting, he said, I find this hard to believe. The legacy that you leave behind and the thought of you going to TNA is just blah. That's exactly what he said, blah. And so yeah, you fast forward to my coming back to do WrestleMania. Sting ended up winning a couple of world titles, had a memorable feud with Kurt Angle, joined the Main Event Mafia, feuded with him again, and it felt like he accomplished everything he wanted to in TNA. WrestleMania 27 was coming up in Atlanta. It was 2011, 10 years since WCW was purchased, and the Hall of Fame needed some WCW influence. And Sting at this point was on a year-to-year type contract. Every year he'd extend or decline. Up to this point, he had accepted every contract that was offered to him. However, this time around, on January 1st, 2011, he was out of contract. So this meant WWE was interested. It came at the right time because of the Hall of Fame thing, and in addition, WWE was going to start the part-timer era where the wrestlers of old got the chance to wrestle on the biggest shows and disappear for most of the year. This was on paper a bad time for TNA as a bunch of the guys were running away. Booker T and Kevin Nash, they both returned at the Royal Rumble and quickly found their spots in the company. So the departure for Sting wasn't out of the question. On February 1st, 2011, the New York Daily News reported that Sting had signed a one-year contract with WWE. This sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling world for all of 2 minutes because it had become apparent that this was false. However, the momentum was swinging in WWE's favor in signing Sting. It just made too much sense. At the same time, vignettes aired of 2/21/11, and as always, fans speculated and made some wild guesses. Sting was one of those guesses, although it didn't seem that wild at the time. But the vignettes I should mention were always about The Undertaker. You know, it was always going to be an Undertaker thing, and it didn't have anything to do with Sting, although a bunch of us actually believed it. The hope fans had for the marquee match between the two was slowly fading. It was already a tough task, but this time it really felt different. You know, everything was lined up well, and it was the perfect time for Sting to come in. They were the guy in their company who showed great loyalty, and a dream match between the two is widely one of the most popular. It's a top 10, maybe even top 5 dream match of all time. However, Sting had other plans and opted to renew his contract with TNA. It was somewhat disappointing because this ended up being his only chance at a match with the Dead Man, and he walked back to TNA where they did a goofy 3-3-11 thing similar to WWE, and he had to wrestle Jeff Hardy, who was clearly not in the best shape. And to understand how close this was, Sting made mention of it in April of 2011. When asked about potentially signing with WWE, Sting said, I want to say it was utter nonsense. That's not true, laughed Sting. It's a dream match that fans would want to see. It was close. I'm glad things turned out the way they did, and there were so many variables. Let's just say that I turned it down for the same reasons I always have. Something in me never trusted what would happen up there based entirely on my track record with other WCW guys and everything that went on after Vince bought WCW. The image of The Undertaker and Sting facing off at WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta would have been special. It just would have been. It would have been an incredible moment. The fact that Sting actually debuted facing The Undertaker, oh man, that would have been crazy. It's been unfortunate. Sting ended up becoming the Joker, doing the little stuff here and there with TNA, before finally debuting with WWE in 2014. We all know how that run went, and that's a story for another day, but here, I just want to talk about the couple of times where Sting almost signed with WWE. You know, there's a bunch of things here, and I just wanted to make a video out of it. I feel like his suspicions were somewhat proven true. You know, he was a bit worried about how they treat him, because once he went there, he was made into the WCW mascot, the whole feud with Triple H, you know. I loved the vibe Sting gave when he came out in 2015 and all that, but I do believe he should have won. It wasn't going to ruin his legacy if he lost, but I just prefer if he won it, personally. So, yeah. Alright, what did you guys think of this video? Please comment down below. That's for his video. Make sure you hit the Stinger Splash and like button, and perhaps the Scorpion Deathlock on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.